Picture this: you're 12 years old, swimming in the warm sapphire waters of the Bay of Naples. It's the year 34 AD. The Mediterranean sun kisses your back as you dive again and again, lungs aching with joy as you challenge your little brother to see who can stay beneath the surface the longest. Every shell you retrieve becomes a prize, every breath held a victory. On a nearby fishing boat, your father watches proudly, cheering each dive. In this moment, your world is simple, pure. The sea is your playground, the sky your ceiling. Then the sails appear. 3 Roman galleys slice towards a shore like sharpened blades, their hulls black and gleaming, purple sails unfurling to reveal the imperial eagle, gold against silk, the mark of the emperor himself. Your father's cheer dies on his lips. His face goes pale, as though the blood has left his body. Everyone in your village knows what it means when these ships appear without warning. Tiberius is recruiting again. What you don't know is that your days spent diving for fun have drawn imperial eyes, that soldiers have been watching you, not openly but from a distance, tracking your breath control, your agility underwater, your strength. They've recorded every moment, quietly labelling you as promising. By dawn tomorrow you'll awaken on a marble floor in a strange villa far from home. There will be no brother beside you, no father calling from a boat. Only other boys, silent, terrified, stripped of their names and origins, waiting for instructions they can't yet understand. By sunset tonight, the boy who played in the waves will begin to vanish. In his place, something new will be shaped. One of the emperor's little swimmers, trained to serve in the private waters of Rome's most powerful man. This is not a nightmare from fiction. This is a true and forgotten corner of ancient history. And the horrors waiting on the island of Capri will haunt you to your final breath. But before we plunge deeper into this hidden world, if you're drawn to the buried truths of history, the stories the textbooks whisper about or leave out entirely, consider subscribing to this channel. Click like if you're learning something new, and let me know in the comments, where are you watching from? Because stories like this one deserve to be remembered, no matter how dark. Tiberius Julius Caesar. Augustus was not always a monster. In fact, when he assumed power in 14 AD after the death of Augustus, many Romans believed the empire was entering a golden age. Tiberius was experienced, capable, and by all accounts a disciplined man. But absolute power, as history shows time and again, has a way of unravelling even the most stable minds. By the time Tiberius turned 70, that unravelling was nearly complete. Around 26 AD, the emperor abandoned Rome entirely. He retreated to the island of Capri, officially for health reasons, though his retreat would stretch nearly a decade. In truth, Capri became his personal kingdom, sealed off from the Senate, from the city, and from moral restraint. Capri was a fortress of luxury, surrounded by cliffs, battered by strong currents, and accessible only during calm weather. The island served both as paradise and prison. Atop its limestone bluffs sat Villa Jovis, the emperor's sprawling marble complex filled with gardens, mosaics, and most importantly, pools. Not the sort you'd imagine for leisure, but rather intricate aquatic chambers engineered for specific disturbing purposes. Some pools were shallow, others plunged deep, connected by narrow underwater tunnels. Heated rooms kept the water warm year-round. Their design wasn't accidental. It served a chilling function, one rarely spoken aloud, even in whispers. These facilities were not for bathing, but for training. The emperor's preferences, once subtle indulgences, had turned into a consuming obsession. According to Roman sources, particularly the historian Suetonius, Tiberius developed a fixation on youth, specifically boys who could swim for long stretches underwater. The court began to refer to them, euphemistically, as little fishes. While modern historians debate how much is fact and how much was exaggerated posthumously to ruin Tiberius's legacy, archaeological evidence on Capri, including the pool systems, aligns disturbingly well with these written records. The recruitment process was far from spontaneous. Imperial agents had been dispatched to fishing towns and coastal villages throughout the Mediterranean. Posing as tax officials or recruiters for athletic training, they observed children at play, particularly boys between 8 and 14 who showed strength, beauty and endurance in the water. When you dove that day, stayed under longer than anyone else, you sealed your own fate. That evening, Roman soldiers approached your father's boat. Their voices were calm, their papers official. They spoke of opportunity, of advancement for your family. But behind their words was a quiet menace. Refusal would bring consequences. You were tested on the spot, made to dive for coins tossed into the sea, to swim laps beside the Imperial ship. You complied because you didn't know not to. You retrieved a coin in under 3 minutes. The soldiers nodded to one another, and just like that, you were theirs. The voyage to Capri lasted 2 days. You were locked in the ship's cargo hold with dozens of other boys, some sobbing, others silent. Whispers passed between you, tales of strange marble pools, of boys who pleased the emperor and were rewarded, and those who didn't and were never seen again. You arrived at dawn. Capri gleamed in the early light like a jewel, cliffs draped in mist, villas glittering atop peaks, but the beauty was deceiving. As your ship neared the island, you noticed details that turned wonder into dread. Armed guards watching from towers, every dock controlled by Imperial men, no signs of civilian life. You were processed like livestock. A second examination followed, this time by Imperial physicians. Breath tests, flexibility, swiftness in water, physical appearance. Those who passed were given clean linen tunics and escorted to quarters. Those who didn't, they were taken away, and you never saw them again. You were placed in a long chamber with 12 narrow beds, marble floors, mosaics of sea nymphs, and Neptune stared down at you from the ceiling, once symbols of play and oceanic beauty. Now they felt like carvings in a tomb. That night you heard the sounds that would come to define your life on Capri. Soft splashing from the next room, whispered prayers, the muffled sobs of someone too young to understand where they were, and the echo of footsteps, slow, deliberate, always approaching. The next morning training would begin. Not training in the art of combat or philosophy, as Roman boys were once promised. No, this training was aquatic, silent and exacting. You would be taught to swim with absolute grace, to submerge for minutes at a time, and to serve in ways no child should ever be made to understand. The boy who dove for seashells was gone, and the emperor was waiting. Your first true teacher on Capri is not an adult, but a boy. Marcus claims to be 15, though the exhaustion behind his eyes suggests someone much older. He has survived nearly 3 years on the island, a feat so rare it's spoken of in whispers. He becomes your unofficial guide, offering quiet warnings and hard-earned wisdom during the hushed hours between sessions. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't make eye contact with the Emperor. Never, ever refuse a command, Marcus murmurs one night, staring at the ceiling mosaics as if they might listen in. And whatever you do, keep swimming. If you can't stay underwater, you won't last long. It's not a metaphor. On Capri, breath is currency. The pools you admired on arrival are no ordinary basins. They're architectural marvels, deep, connected chambers carved into solid stone, designed not for leisure but for performance. The water is heated to maintain endurance. Marble ledges and platforms are positioned to accommodate the Emperor's precise tastes. This is where your training begins. Each morning you're drilled on breath holding, 2 minutes, then 3, until the burning in your chest becomes familiar. You learn to swim without sound, to move in seamless patterns around statues and pillars, to navigate submerged tunnels without surfacing. At first it feels like sport, but slowly the purpose becomes clearer. Your body is being shaped into something functional. Your childhood is being chipped away, not with cruelty but with discipline master's refinement. The staff never raise their voices. Their instructions are calm, practiced, and yet what they prepare you for is something no child should ever be taught. There are lessons you don't understand, gestures, routines, interactions you're told to practice in the pool. The instructors speak in euphemisms, service protocol, imperial comfort, attentive positioning. But the older boys know what it means. They exchange silent glances, warning each other of what's to come. One afternoon, you are summoned. Tiberius reclines on a marble dais that extends over the pool like a stage. Steam curls around his withered frame, and a silk-draped canopy shields his eyes from the sun. He gestures for the boys, his little fishers, to begin their demonstration. You enter the water with trembling limbs. Everything Marcus taught you runs through your mind. Swim gracefully, dive rhythmically, avoid splashes. As you circle beneath the Emperor's perch, you feel his eyes tracking every motion, not with warmth, but with cold calculation. You're not a child to him. You're part of a system, a function, a stimulus. Occasionally he offers instructions. Some are harmless, asking you to retrieve a stone or surface near his side. Others are more disturbing, requesting motions that feel unnatural, even degrading. You comply, because you must. And when it's over, you're praised for your composure. A nod from the staff, a better meal that evening. It's not kindness, it's control. This is how the system works. Tiberius was not chaotic in his cruelty. He was methodical. The villa operated like a machine. Every hall, every chamber, every servant tuned to serve one man's desires. And the training you receive is not just physical, it's psychological. Rewards come in the form of food, clothing, or kind words. Punishments are subtle but brutal. Isolation in dark chambers, withheld meals, cold baths, or total silence. But the most powerful tool they wield is hope. The belief that obedience might bring safety, that if you do everything right, you might be spared. You come to dread the Emperor's bad moods. When reports from Rome are troubling, uprisings in the provinces, tension with the Senate, his demands grow darker. Training becomes harsher. Sessions in the pools are longer, colder. The boys learn to predict his temperament the way farmers predict the weather. A storm in the capital means a storm on the island. Yet Capri is not always loud with violence. Often the horror is in its silence. The villa is quiet, orderly. The staff refer to the Emperor's activities as recreation and discuss his preferences as if they were dietary requirements. You hear guards joke about swimming drills, slaves gossip about who received a new tunic. This normalization, this administrative tone, is perhaps the most chilling part of life on Capri. Because the system is not hidden, it is accepted. Even the lessons have structure. You and the other boys are taught to read, write, and recite Roman literature. The Emperor sometimes attends, quoting Virgil or Plato with startling elegance. And then, with the same voice, he gives an order that strips another piece of someone's soul away. Marcus remains your lifeline. He explains the unspoken rules, helps you avoid the worst assignments, shares stolen food. He survived by playing a dangerous game, giving just enough to please, never enough to be noticed. But even he is breaking down. You notice him flinch during sessions. He begins to sleep less, eat less, speak in fragments. Not all boys are so lucky. Some adapt too well, becoming eager participants in exchange for small comforts. Others, like Lucius, simply vanish from within. By the time you meet him, Lucius hasn't spoken in weeks. He walks in circles, eats with mechanical rhythm, stares through walls. He refuses to cry. One morning, Lucius doesn't get up. He lies in bed, motionless, ignoring commands. By evening, he is gone. No one speaks of it. By your second year, you begin to understand the full scope of what Tiberius has created. This is not just a hidden retreat. It's a production line, a palace engineered for silence, secrecy, and satisfaction. Records are kept, charts maintained. Boys are tracked for growth, flexibility, stamina. They are not students, not servants, not even children. They are inventory. A scribe, a former boy who aged out of service, logs your latest swimming times, your body weight, your response to orders. He doesn't smile, doesn't make eye contact, just writes and moves on to the next. And you begin to ask yourself, is this survival, Or is this surrender? You've lost track of how long you've been here. Weeks, months. Your body is stronger, faster, but your soul feels thinner. The boy from Naples Bay is fading. You can still remember his voice, his joy, but each day that memory drifts further out to sea. The villa is now your entire world. Its walls contain everything: pleasure, punishment, silence, and shadow. And outside, the waves continue to crash against the cliffs, as if trying endlessly to wash the island clean. By your third year on Capri, you no longer flinch at the sound of your name being called. You know what each tone of voice means, what each nod from a guard will require. You understand the rhythms of the villa, when the emperor is likely to summon boys, when silence is safest, and when tears must not fall. But understanding doesn't mean surviving. Marcus, your mentor, protector, and friend, the boy who once taught you to keep your head down and your strokes silent, begins to unravel. He had lasted longer than almost anyone, adapting with a precision that kept him just useful enough to avoid harm, but never so visible that he became a favorite. That balance, however, shattered one spring evening. The demands placed on him during an especially prolonged session broke something inside. He returned to the dormitory silent and glass-eyed. That night, while the rest of you pretended to sleep, Marcus slipped away and climbed to the edge of the cliffs above the villa's outer walls. There, overlooking the sea he hadn't swum in freely for 5 years, he chose the only exit Capri allowed. He didn't scream, he didn't leave a message, but his absence was deafening. For you, Marcus's death isn't just loss, it's revelation. You realize that survival on this island doesn't mean staying alive. It means being hollowed out until nothing remains of the child you were. You begin to understand what true death looks like, not a stopped heart, but a soul slowly erased. And you ask yourself the question that many before you have asked in silence: if I die here, will anyone even know I lived? When Tiberius finally began to deteriorate, not just mentally, but physically, there was no relief. If anything, his suffering deepened the suffering of others. He developed painful skin ailments that made physical contact unbearable, struggled with breathing in the hot pool chambers, and could no longer sit comfortably for long periods. Yet his desires remained, more erratic, more insistent, as if trying to defy the body's decline. Rather than lessen the burden on the boys, these ailments heightened the emperor's need to control what he could. Some sessions became longer, stranger, less predictable. He demanded performances, games, and rituals with increasing intensity, not always cruel in appearance, but infused with an emotional desperation that made them even more disturbing. You were no longer just serving him, you were helping him chase away death. The villa, once a polished machine of exploitation, began to show cracks. Servants whispered. Scribes made quiet mistakes. The guards looked tired. Something was shifting. And then Rome called. Tiberius had enemies in the capital. The Senate had grown impatient with his isolation. The Praetorian Guard, once fiercely loyal, now listened more closely to his successor, Caligula. Rumors swirled that the emperor had become unstable, that his time was ending. In 37 AD, Tiberius either died of illness or, as some believe, was quietly suffocated by a guard acting on Caligula's orders. The moment the emperor died, the illusion shattered. The villa was sealed, the pools were drained. Records were burned or locked away. Those who worked on the island were reassigned or silenced. And the boys, you and others like you, those still living, found yourselves in a kind of limbo. No one knew what to do with you. You had been trained for a life no longer acknowledged. You had no official titles, no roles in the empire, no families waiting with open arms. You were, in every way that mattered, invisible. Some were relocated quietly to other imperial villas or disappeared into monasteries. Others were sent back to their provinces, given false names or small pensions. A few, like you, simply vanished from the pages of history. No graves, no records, no legacy. But history remembers in fragments. After Tiberius's death, Roman historian Suetonius documented what he called the emperor's retreat into wickedness. Writing in the 12 Caesars, he described scenes that echoed what you lived through, including the disturbing training of young swimmers for private entertainment. Suetonius, though constrained by the norms of Roman rhetoric, made no effort to sanitize what he found. He described organized groups of children selected for what he called improper amusements, and even recorded the term little fishes, used to refer to boys trained to swim around the emperor during his baths. Other sources echoed these reports. Cassius Dio and Tacitus, though more reserved, alluded to unspeakable events on Capri, events whispered about in senatorial circles but never formally addressed. These were not medieval myths or medieval moralizers writing centuries later. These were contemporary chroniclers, close enough to power to know what had been hidden. And yet, over time, the story faded. Capri today is a tourist paradise, a breathtaking Mediterranean gem with luxury hotels, pastel villas, and cheerful guides who gesture proudly at Roman ruins. Visitors marvel at Villa Jovis, the grand palace Tiberius built atop the cliffs, and admire the engineering of the ancient pools carved into stone. But they are rarely told what those pools were for. They are not told about the cries that once echoed off these marble walls, or the boys who were forced to become shadows, serving not Rome but the darkest appetites of its ruler. Your name is gone. Your voice was never recorded. You are not in the histories, except as a statistic, a fisher boy, perhaps, taken from a coastal village. Your story is folded into a sentence, maybe two, if mentioned at all, but your suffering was real. And the sea remembers. It remembers the splash of small bodies diving on command. It remembers the breathless moments under the surface when fear pressed tighter than water. It remembers the stillness of the dormitories at night and the sound of footsteps passing like ghosts between marble chambers. Most of all, it remembers those who stopped swimming altogether. The emperor is gone. The empire that enabled him has crumbled. But the island remains, not just as a place, but as a symbol. A monument to how power, when unchecked, can rot from within. How silence can be enforced with marble walls. How children, seen as disposable, can be erased from history unless someone chooses to speak for them. If this journey into history's most painful corners has shaken you, stay with us. Click on the video now appearing on your screen to uncover another truth buried beneath imperial splendor. And if you believe these voices deserve to be heard, stories forgotten by time but not by truth, subscribe so we can continue this work together. Because history is not only kings and empires, it is the tears of the powerless and the memory of those who never had the chance to speak.